Welcome back to the Lifestyle School podcast. I am your host, Hope Plack, and today we are diving into something that is truly foundational to everything else when it comes to our health, and that is metabolic health. Now, before we get into it today, a quick disclaimer. I am not a medical doctor. This podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Always, always, always consult with your doctor before making health changes. With that said, here is the truth that too few people are talking about. Most of the symptoms, struggles, and diagnoses that people are facing today can be traced back to one root issue, and that is poor metabolic health. So, if you've been dealing with low energy, stubborn weight gain, that's probably you and why you're here, cravings, hormonal imbalances, brain fog, or even something like PCOS or high blood pressure, this episode is for you. So, I want to start with the basics, and that has to start with really defining what is metabolic health. So, at its core, metabolic health is how efficiently our body produces and uses energy. And really, that's it. So, I think when we think of metabolic health, we think metabolism and then we just think calories, right? But really, it has to do with how our body produces and uses energy, whether that's energy coming in or energy we're getting from inside of ourselves. Okay. So, every cell in our body has to produce energy to do its job. So, from your heart, your brain, your muscles, your liver, your immune system, they all depend on energy. And fun fact, our bodies have over 30 trillion cells. That is a lot of cells, and that is a lot of energy that is being used and that is being produced. That energy is produced in little cellular engines called mitochondria. Maybe you remember from back in middle school, probably. And when those mitochondria are working well, you feel energized, you feel clear-headed, you feel balanced. But when they're not, that's when things really start to fall apart. So I want to talk just a little bit about how our body actually turns food into energy, because that is exactly what our metabolism is doing all day long. And I don't know about you, but sometimes it's good to have a little refresher, right? So, at the center of every cell in our body, again, 30 plus trillion cells, are these tiny little engines called mitochondria, and they are our body's energy producers. And here's how they work. We're just going to go kind of step by step through the process. So, you eat food, right? Your body breaks that food down into smaller parts, mainly glucose from things like carbs or excess protein, and then also fatty acids from fat. That fuel enters our cells. Hormones like insulin help glucose get into your cells, where it can be used to make energy in our mitochondria. The mitochondria take over inside your cells. The mitochondria use that glucose or those fatty acids as fuel along with oxygen you breathe, with the oxygen you breathe, to start producing energy. This process makes ATP, and that's short for adenosine triphosphate. I believe I said that right. And it's the main form of energy your body can actually use. So think of it like a fully charged battery that powers everything you do, from thinking clearly to working out to making hormones. It's all coming from your mitochondria and the ATP. If oxygen is um, low, problems start to happen. So the whole process requires oxygen. And that's why when you're not breathing well, maybe you're under stress, or maybe you have a lot of inflammation, your energy is going to drop. And that's because your mitochondria can't run at full speed. The When your mitochondria are strong and efficient, you are going to feel energized. Your metabolism works really well. Your brain is sharp, and your body burns fat instead of storing it. I'm going to say that again. Your body burns fat instead of storing it, because I know a lot of you are here for fat loss, weight loss tools. But um, if your mitochondria isn't working well, that is when things start to go awry. When you feel sluggish, you're going to feel tired, foggy, inflamed, and your body really starts breaking down instead of thriving. Because again, every cell of your body has a different job, whether it's your brain, whether it's for your skin, whether it's for your muscles, your immune system. And if those cells aren't getting the energy that they need, or aren't producing the energy that they need efficiently, they're not going to be able to do their job efficiently. Just like if you wake up after staying up until 3 in the morning reading, your favorite book, or maybe you're up all night with the kids and you have to go to work the next morning, you're just not as productive as if you'd gotten a really good night of sleep, right? And the same is with our mitochondria. If our mitochondria aren't able to work properly and make energy efficiently the way that they're meant to, they can't do their jobs in the different systems of our body as efficiently. And that's when things start to break down. So, mitochondria is really at the center of metabolic health. And that's why I wanted to expound a little bit on how our mitochondria work and what they do. So, back to looking at metabolic health and that definition, I want to give you a clinical definition of what is good metabolic health. As I mentioned earlier, um, actually, I don't think I mentioned this earlier. I'm getting I'm getting off track. Let me come back to this. So clinically, metabolic health has 5 key markers. If you were to go to your medical doctor and they were going to, look at your chart. And first is waist circumference they look at, and I'll get into why that is. Second is fasting blood glucose. Then we have HDL cholesterol, which is your quote unquote good cholesterol, triglycerides, which are blood fats, and then blood pressure. And here's the thing I was about to say, and then realized I hadn't said it yet. What's honestly really shocking and sad and really horrible when it comes to the health of our nation here in the US is that research shows, and I believe this was in 2018, that only 12 to 15% of American adults are metabolically healthy, according to these 5 guidelines: waist circumference, blood glucose, HDL, cholesterol, triglycerides, and blood pressure. And that means 85% of people, so I think that's like 1 in 8, 1 in 9. It's probably worse, because this was 7 years ago and our trajectory hasn't been getting better as a nation. But 1 in 8, 1 in 9 people are not optimized metabolically, meaning the energy production in their cells to do their jobs is subpar. And, even when people look thin or maybe even go to the gym, that doesn't necessarily mean they're metabolically healthy. Many of these people are actually metabolically dysfunctional and they don't even know it, which is half of the problem. Because this isn't just about our weight, it's about how well our body can function at the most basic level, and that is the mitochondria within our 30 trillion cells. So, why does this matter? Well, every chronic condition we're seeing today has a metabolic root. When your metabolism is broken, your cells, like I said, can't produce energy properly, and that creates a cascade of problems across the body. So this could show up like fatigue. Your cells literally can't keep up, right, with energy production. It could look like brain frog. I hope no one has a brain frog. Brain fog. And, this something to note is your brain runs on glucose and oxygen. And when energy production slows, mental clarity really goes out the window. And it can directly be connected to your metabolic health. Typically, it is. Hormonal issues are rooted in metabolic health. Insulin resistance impacts estrogen, progesterone, the 2 main female hormones for men. It impacts testosterone, and across the board, it affects cortisol balance, which is our stress hormone, right? I feel like cortisol is kind of having its a moment in the sun, so to speak. Everyone's talking about cortisol face or cortisol on social media, and it's like women can't work out hard because they're going to spike their cortisol and it's not going to work. And it's like, no, we actually need cortisol to survive, but it has to be regulated. And insulin resistance directly impacts your cortisol balance. And we'll have to get into that on another episode. Um, but your hormones are directly related to your metabolic health. And then what a lot of people, see and probably mostly think of when they think about metabolic health is weight gain, right? And if your metabolic health isn't up to speed, you are definitely going to be storing fat instead of burning it for energy. And, that's related to insulin resistance, which goes hand in hand with metabolic health. And then, things like PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, type 2 diabetes, which, they used to call adult onset type 2 diabetes, but they got rid of the adult onset part because so many children are being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, as well as fatty liver disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. It's really becoming a pediatric epidemic. And things like high blood pressure, these are all driven by poor metabolic health. Even things like Alzheimer's disease. Hopefully you've heard this by now, but they're now calling Alzheimer's disease where you have, the buildup of amyloid plaque in your brain. And they're connecting it to blood sugar dysregulation, and they are calling it type 3 diabetes of the brain. And so, metabolic health um, is really connected to every area of our health, right? You don't have separate health problems. You have one system-wide problem showing up in different ways. And so if you fix the metabolism, you're often are going to start reversing a lot of these symptoms. And so prior to starting this podcast and starting Hope Pet Coaching, I worked in a functional medicine clinic for 8 years, and I ran a weight loss program there. We did functional medicine, we did a lot of blood testing. And then from there, what we would do for patients is we would look at their diet and lifestyle, we'd look at a ton of blood work, looking at all the different systems of their body. We'd look at food sensitivities. We'd look if they have any underlying infections. What is the balance of bacteria in their small bowel? And we'd put together a lifestyle plan centered around lifestyle changes, getting enough sleep, prioritizing exercise, fixing the food that they're eating, how much they're eating, when they're eating, and then giving them supplements to help fill in the gaps where, you know, their body was depleted and what they didn't need. And what is so amazing with this, and I'm really fortunate. The doctor I was working with is actually my dad. He's been doing this for over 40 years. I got to work with him for 8 years, but I grew up around this, and I grew up, in this clinic. I started off cleaning the clinic when I was, 8, 9, 10 years old, and then eventually was the nutrition coach and health and lifestyle coach at the clinic. But over and over and over again, what we saw in clinic is that when people fixed their metabolism, meaning they fixed how their cells were able to respond to the energy and the food that they were bringing in by, giving them the right food, right? You got to cut out a lot of bad junk for most of us. People got better. And I mean, we're talking autoimmune conditions, we're talking infertility. We saw some really, really sick patients in clinic, and it was just absolutely amazing what the body was capable of doing when given the right tools. And obviously taking away the things that were causing so many of the problems. And so, I want to encourage you, if you feel like you have like this laundry list of things that just don't seem to be working right in your body. Maybe you feel like your concerns have been dismissed by people in the healthcare field. I want you to know, if you can fix this mitochondria within your cells by addressing your metabolism, everything is going to get better. And, that is even, since leaving working in the clinic, and now working with clients on my own here at Hope Pet Coaching, where we primarily just focus on metabolic health. in clinic, we did all sorts of stuff, people with kidney, lung disease, autoimmune conditions. That's not so much my focus now anymore. More, it's just like really dialed in on metabolic health. Because what I have found is that if we fix someone's metabolism, and this is what I've seen with my clients since then, if we just focus in on metabolism by regulating blood sugar, by doing those basic lifestyle things like sleeping and drinking water and then eating at the right times, um, lowering insulin, people get better. They become more fertile. They have fewer menstrual symptoms. Their hunger gets under control, which is a huge thing for people. Those people who couldn't lose weight, they just start dropping weight. And that all can happen when we set up our metabolism to be able to work the way that it was meant to. So, I want to talk specifically about weight in regards to metabolism. And, if you have felt stuck in a cycle of dieting, of working out, of counting calories, and still not losing fat, this part is especially for you because I feel really, really passionate about this topic because this was me. I was a nutrition coach at the time, I was a personal trainer. I had just had my first kid and I could not lose weight to save my life. I was about 20 pounds heavier than when I'd gotten married after having my first baby. And I worked out 5 days a week and I worked out hard. I was lifting heavy weight. I was doing resistance training. I was very strong, but I just like had too much body fat. I would count my calories. I'd count my macros, could not lose weight. And I didn't realize that I was metabolically unhealthy. And when you are metabolically unhealthy, you're likely dealing with some level of insulin resistance. And I realized this was like at the root of the issue for me. And then, since I've been able to learn this and start applying it to coaching my clients, the results have been absolutely incredible. And so when insulin is elevated, your body can't access stored fat to be used as energy, and it stays locked away, just like, think about it as like a deep freezer in your basement. So instead of being a fat burner, your body becomes a sugar burner. And there's only so much sugar available from the food that you're eating constantly, right? So it makes you feel constantly hungry. And even if you reduce calories, if your insulin is high, you're still going to be taking some of that food that's coming in and storing it as fat because insulin is your fat storing signaling hormone. And that's going to just leave you feeling hungry and frustrated and like feeling like your body is broken. But really, your body's not broken. It's just doing what it's been set up to do with these hormones. So we have to sort that out, right? So that's why people say, I'm doing everything right and it's not working. And I just want this message to get across to you because, I think people in the who want to lose weight have just been so underserved by nutrition and health coaches. Willpower is not the issue. It's your metabolic health, which is the issue. And it's not addressed if you're just counting calories or you're counting macros. And so when we fix the metabolism by balancing blood sugar, by improving insulin sensitivity, by supporting our mitochondria and building muscle, fat loss just becomes a natural byproduct. It's not a forced outcome of counting every little morsel of food that comes into our mouth. And so I want you to hear this again. If you feel like you're doing everything right and it's not working, I want you to know it's not a willpower issue. It's not like you're not counting everything issue. It's a metabolic issue. And we have to fix the metabolic issue before fat loss is going to just be a natural byproduct of the lifestyle that you're living. And I also want to tell you, you don't have to count calories or macros to lose body fat. If you do this in a way where you focus on fixing your metabolism first, it's going to happen so easily and so quickly. You can turn it into a lifestyle. You're going to be like, oh my gosh, why didn't I do this 10 years ago? Um, and so here is something you may be thinking, how do I know if my metabolism is at the root of the problems that I'm facing? So I'm going to give you some red flags to look for um, that are going to be like, okay, yes, it's probably my metabolic health. So if you feel tired, even after sleeping, that is for sure a red flag. If you crash in the afternoon or rely on caffeine to function, again, red flag. And I will put a little asterisk on there. I mean, if you're up all night with small kids or if you're not sleeping well, that might be why you're tired. But if you're getting like a decent amount of sleep and you're crashing every afternoon, heavily relying on caffeine, or if you crash after eating, that is a sign of metabolic dysfunction. If you have intense cravings, especially for sugar and carbs, again, red flag. If you carry extra weight around your midsection, again, red flag. If you have trouble sleeping or if you wake up groggy, again, if that's not related to small humans, um, again, red flag. If you struggle with PMS, low libido, or irregular cycles, that is a sure sign your metabolism is not working properly. And one thing actually that I feel like doesn't get enough airtime when it comes to fixing our metabolic health, and this is something that I've experienced myself. A bunch of clients have also said this exact same thing. But when we fix our metabolic health, we no longer have painful periods like women. If we could get to a point where we don't have 1 week out of a month of like 4 weeks in a month where we're like relying on over-the-counter medication to just like baseline kind of function because of painful cramping, like that is life-changing. So fix your metabolic health, get rid of your crazy PMS symptoms. And then lastly, if you've been told that your blood sugar is maybe a little high or if your cholesterol is a little off, that is a metabolic issue. So there's also some other things that you could look at in regards to blood tests. If you have like a physical coming up, or if you've had one recently, you had some lab work done. And the great news about labs now is you can actually just order them online and then go to a LabCorp or like a Quest Diagnostics and get your results yourself. I mean, most people I think probably don't know what any of it means, but let me give you some numbers to look for on labs that maybe you've had done or will have done in the future. So fasting insulin is a super important lab that I feel like is just now kind of being done, at least in the functional medicine world. I don't think many medical doctors are doing it yet, but fasting insulin is going to give you an idea if you are insulin resistant, how high your insulin is, to give you an idea of, is your insulin so high it's blocking fat burning? And if you want to be in ideal fat burning mode, you don't want your fasting insulin above 5, okay? Most people that I've seen who have come in, they want to lose weight, their fasting insulin is usually above 10 or 15. The higher it is, the more likely you are to become diabetic, type 2 diabetic. So fasting insulin is super important lab to have done. And unfortunately, it's probably not going to be done on a metabolic panel done like that was ordered by your medical doctor. So that might be one you have to seek out or talk to them about. Next is fasting glucose. Ideally, you would like to see that below 90 milligrams per deciliter. Triglycerides below 100. Even lower though is great. If you're like pushing 100, if I'm coaching you, I'm going to say you're eating too many carbohydrates because triglycerides are blood fats, but really they are in a direct indicator of how many carbohydrates that you're eating. HDL cholesterol for women, ideally, we'd like to see that above 50. And then for a waist to height ratio, we'd like to keep it under 0.5. But, I want to really stress this. And I think this is really important and something that we don't give enough credit. But you don't need a diagnosis to know something's off. Like you don't need lab work to know something's off. Your symptoms are data. And our body is incredibly good at letting us know when things are off. And really, the key question is like, are we paying attention? Are we listening to what our body's trying to tell us? So I want to leave you with good news. Metabolic health is 100% reversible with lifestyle. Like you can do so much without any supplements, without any crazy medical interventions or medication. You can transform your metabolic health with your lifestyle. You don't need a magic pill. You don't need a super complicated protocol. You just need to start addressing the root causes. And this is exactly what I go in depth in lifestyle school. And the first thing is to eat real food, okay? There are definitely tweaks you can do with food, but starting by eating real food, ditching ultra processed garbage, focus on protein, healthy fats, and then fiber rich vegetables. Focusing on those foods, eating until you feel satisfied, that is going to be a game changer for you. Secondly, time restricted eating. Fasting really helps lower insulin and it gives your mitochondria a rest from taking in, having to process all of this glucose that's being produced as a byproduct of the food that we're eating. Um, but even just like stopping snacking, we have such a culture of eating 24/7, which is destroying our metabolic health because our mitochondria never get a rest. Every time we eat, we raise insulin. And high insulin means no fat burning, okay? And it means metabolic distress. So, time restricted eating, just sitting down, eating 3 meals a day with no screens, like slowly chewing and enjoying your food, that is going to change your life. It's going to change your blood sugar. It's going to change your metabolic health. You're going to like make so much progress just doing that. And then third, we got to build muscle, right? Muscle is your metabolic currency. It stores glucose and it burns energy around the clock. It's a very glucose demanding muscle, or tissue is probably a better word. And the more muscle you have, the more the more flexibility you're going to have in your diet to eventually eat more carbs and be metabolically healthy. If you have low muscle tone, like you really don't need any carbohydrates, full stop. And then number four, and I have just been going off about this on my Instagram if you've been around recently over at our Hope Plaque Coaching Instagram, but you have to sleep like it's your job. Okay. Sleep is so important. Circadian rhythm drives your hormones. It drives your fat metabolism. It controls your hunger hormones. I don't know if you've ever gotten a poor night of sleep and then realized the next day all you want to eat is carbs and sugar. Yeah, that's because sleep is super important to your hormones and whether you feel satisfied or ultra hungry, amongst so many other things. Number five is we just have to move more, like not for calories, but to help your cells become more insulin sensitive. I was thinking about this the other day as I was slugging away on the stair stepper. I've tried to make this commitment to myself that when I go to the gym, try to go to the gym 3 days a week to do weightlifting. But I just hate cardio, you guys. I've always hated cardio, and because I've hated it, I like just don't do it. But you know, I guess I'll go into it. For the last like 2.5 years, my weightlifting has really been stalled due to issues that I've been having with my back. They haven't been getting better. So I've lost muscle mass and I'm just really restricted in what I can do for weightlifting. And come January this year, I was, trying to have some hard conversations with myself and I realized like I need to like stop neglecting my cardio so much. And so long story short, I have told myself I'm gonna do 20 minutes on the stair stepper because I love to hike for 20 minutes every time I go to the gym. And I was doing the stair stepper just this last week and I was hating every moment of it. And it just felt so incredibly hard. And I looked at what it said my calorie burn was. And you guys, I had been on there for 15 minutes. I was breathing so heavy. I was sweating bullets and I hadn't even burned 100 calories. I was like, are you kidding me? This is such a waste of time. But I wasn't doing it obviously for the calorie burn. And that's my whole point here is like, we just need to stop sitting so much and we need to start moving more. Like, after your meal, go for a little walk. It doesn't have to be long. It could be for 5 minutes. It could be for 10, 20 minutes, whatever you have time for. But just being more intentional about movement is going to help us with blood sugar control, insulin sensitivity, and it's going to change you. And then number six is we got to manage stress, guys. This is such a big one because we live in a world that I think glorifies stress, but high cortisol is going to result in high insulin and vice versa, and it's going to stall your fat loss. So For me, what I'm working on in managing stress right now is when I'm driving and there's like, a bunch of stupid drivers on the road who are being incredibly unsafe. And I'm driving my minivan. I've got my three kids in the car and I get all worked up about these people driving like idiots. My body can't tell whether I'm driving on the highway with idiots or if I'm being chased by a lion. It thinks I'm being chased by a lion and I'm actually not. So I'm trying to manage that stress in my life. But this looks like across the board, we have to manage our stress, and there is stress that, like driving in the car, I can choose to get worked up about that and I can choose not to. But there is stress that, in life we can't get away from, whether that's maybe in a job situation, maybe that's a relationship, maybe you're a caregiver for someone, you can't escape that stress. So you have to figure out how to live with it and move through it. And, I think that is also kind of on my docket for a future episode on this podcast is just talking about how can you deal with that kind of stress. But long story short, I'm kind of going off on a tangent, is we got to figure out how to manage our stress. And one thing that, it does connect back to stress is that this process is not about being perfect. It's about consistency. It's about stacking simple wins, like building that confidence in ourselves. Because when you live in a way that supports your metabolism, your body automatically starts working for you, not against you. And I'm just going to give a quick shout out and plug to my client, Amber, who just finished her 8 weeks of personalized coaching with Lifestyle School. Um, you know, if you talk to her, she would tell you she did not do the 8 weeks perfectly. And I think for a lot of us, it's hard to not do something perfectly. But what she found is that, she celebrated those small wins and she set her metabolism up to work properly through what we talked about in our sessions and through what she was learning in Lifestyle School. And over the course of 8 weeks, after a year and a half of trying to do it all, the like calorie counting, macro counting, CrossFit, all of it, she lost 15 pounds in 8 weeks. And she said it felt easy. I mean, there's obviously hard moments, but it felt easy. It was attainable. And she didn't count one bite or calorie. And what that process did is it helped her build confidence in herself and help her realize her body is indeed not broken. It just hasn't been set up to burn body fat the way it's meant to because her metabolism wasn't addressed. So metabolic health really is the missing link. I hope you're getting that through all of this that I'm saying. It's the reason why people feel stuck, tired, frustrated, and, despite feeling like they're doing everything right. But I just want to remind you that you are not broken. Your body is just responding to the inputs you've been giving it. And we have to change the inputs, and then the outputs will change. It's really that simple. And, I want to let you know if you're ready to take the first step, I want to invite you to check out free resources that I have on my website, www.hopeplackcoaching.com. Or, send me a message via email or on Instagram. I love hearing from you guys. You can even comment on this podcast. I've created Lifestyle School for people to figure out how to make their metabolism work for them. I also do some one-on-one coaching with limited spots available with Lifestyle School, and that's an 8-week program. So if you need more help, I've got a ton of free resources for you. Whether that's on my website. I try to post content on my social media pages, Hope Plaque Coaching, just to help, give you some ideas and education and training to think, how can I think my way through what might be holding me back on my health and weight loss journey. So with that, I want to say thank you so much for joining me today on today's episode. I don't take it for granted that you're here giving me your time to listen to what I have to say. If this resonated with you, I would love for you to take a screenshot and share it on Instagram and tag me at Hope Plaque Coaching. If you could send this to a friend who you think might find it interesting or helpful, that would really blessed me a ton. Because I'm going to be honest, it's hard to get the word out there about what you're doing. Like on Instagram and social media, it's just a very saturated market. So if you feel like this has been helpful, if you could share it with a friend, if you could subscribe to the podcast, if you could give me a review, all of these things would help me so much. Just get the word out about what I'm trying to share with people, what I'm trying to teach people, and hopefully help someone else who maybe feels really stuck. So with that, guys, thank you so much again for being here, and we'll see you next time on Lifestyle School.